My name is Marjorie Gans, and I'm a member of the board of the Writers' Room of Boston. And I'm delighted that you could join us. And if you started with us last week and you're here again, that's wonderful, because tonight we're going to do it. So this is our April reading and our virtual series, Readings from the Room. And it began 1 year ago in March. If you don't know about the Writers' Room, it is a co-working space in downtown Boston for any and all writers, whether you're established or emerging, who want or need a quiet place to write. The room is open 24 hours a day. It provides desks and silence and the quiet companionship of other writers. We've been serving writers of the greater Boston area since 1993. And if you are curious or have any questions, please let us know. We'd be delighted to have new members, and we now have different levels of membership, including a virtual membership for those who can't easily make it to the room. So if you're interested, please contact our program director, Leslie Ostrow, at thewritersroomofboston.org, and that address will be in the chat. In 2022, we launched this new reading series as a way to reach out to the writing community during the pandemic and share the wonderful writing from both established and emerging writers. Some of the readers have called or used to call or now call the Writers' Room home. Some are now from different parts of the country, which is a benefit that we take from Zoom and even the pandemic, I suppose. Tonight we have Hannah Halpern and Doug Brendel. Hannah is a fiction writer and has recently published her debut novel. She teaches at Grub Street. Doug writes a humorous blog and fiction. He is also an actor. As we go along, feel free to use the comments feature in the box, the chat feature in the box at the bottom of the screen, and you can type your questions in there. This series is made possible by grants from the Mass Cultural Council and the Boston Cultural Council, and we also rely on friends. If you enjoy the program, please consider making a contribution using that donate button at the bottom of your screen. We will also be recording this reading, and a replay will be available on the Writers' Room website. So I will introduce our next reader, and thank you for that reading. I can hear so many threads that I suspect you are going to read as the book goes on. Our next reader is Doug Brendel. Doug has written 2 award-winning novels from dragonheadpress.com, The Dramatic Pleasure and Power, and a funny new novel, Praying for Mrs. Mombasa. Doug also produces a humorous weekly blog about life in small-town New England, and it's called Outsidah.com, and it's spelled that way, O-U-T-S-I-D-A-H. He and his wife, Christina, are co-founders of a 20-year-old volunteer humanitarian charity in Belarus, newthing.net. Meanwhile, Doug makes his living writing fundraising appeals for a wide variety of good causes and teaches others to write those appeals as well. He's frequently seen on stage in community theater productions. These days, he's writing a new play, Best If Used By. Doug will read from his new novel, Praying for Mrs. Mombasa, which he described to me as a quote-unquote women's book that doesn't fit easily into any genre. You can learn more about Doug on his website, www.dougbrendel.com. Doug.
Thank you, Marjorie. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you all for being here. The book Praying for Mrs. Mombasa is a book designed to attack racism and sexism using humor with arch stereotypes. And along the way, it attacks stereotyping, which is something we all tend to do. The book exposes this. So there's a lot of material in here that in context is potentially offensive, but so far everybody's gotten the humor of it and understood that this book is against what it's against. But we'll fast forward to the end of the story, or toward the end of the story. This is the story set in inner city Chicago There's a Hispanic pastor with a Norwegian wife, and upside down stereotypes. The Hispanic is cool and the Norwegian burns hot. There's a church administrator whose name is very young, like the Cat Stevens song, because of a deal that her hippie grandmother made with her parents. And all you need to know to understand this chapter is that at the very end, there'll be a reference to Ingrid. That's the pastor's wife. This is chapter 55. The title is Poppy. A woman with a beautifully wrinkled face and very long, straight white-gray hair is wearing an orange Hindu print kaftan and sitting in a grand peacock rattan chair and looking into a smartphone. Very Young is very confused. Mona? Yes, darling. Mona speaks with a shaky voice from an aged larynx. Very Young stands abruptly at her desk, picking up her phone and frowning into the screen. With the fingers of her free hand, she presses quickly on the earbud in one ear, then the other, as if this will help her hear better, when in fact she's both hearing and seeing with perfect clarity. It's understanding she's having a problem with at the moment. Darling? You haven't called me darling since grade school. I know, dear, and I'm sorry. Mona replies sweetly. My mistake. I hope you can forgive me. Very Young is almost wincing with mystification. You FaceTime? Oh, of course. Mona smiles and snaps her fingers as women did back in her day. I've become quite the independent woman. Very Young suddenly stands, almost militantly. Her legs are straight diagonals, stretching her short skirt. What's going on, Mona? She asks, the words arcing with suspicion. Where's Poppy? Poppy's dead, dear, Mona replies with no change in tone. Dead? God! Very Young's nervous energy is marching her around to the front of the desk. What happened? He just didn't wake up, dear, Mona says calmly. When? Very Young asks. This morning. Very Young taps quickly on her iPhone screen. She glares at it in disbelief. Are you still in Catalina? Of course, dear. It's 6:30 in the morning there. When did he? About 6:20, dear. Very Young sits heavily on the front edge of her desk. Mona, you are one spooky bitch. Mona smiles with satisfaction. And you're my only grandchild, dear, which is why I'm calling you first. Very Young's mouth opens to this, but she's too stunned to say anything. Finally, she gulps. Me first? Mona, don't you have to call the police or something? Oh, I'll call Freddie, she replies casually. Who's Freddie? Our lawyer, Freddie. He's been with us forever. He'll take care of it all. I'll need to talk to him anyway about the money, but I wanted to chat with you before that. Mona, what are you talking about? As near as I can tell, dear, it's about $500 million. Very Young seems to wilt a little against the desk. Geez, Mona. I've been thinking about this very seriously ever since your grandfather's diagnosis. I've been waiting for this day. Looking forward to it, actually. There's a tea service on a small tea table at Mona's side. She reaches for a cup and sips as she continues talking. You may not have discovered it yet at your age, my dear, but men can be, shall we say, burdensome in their insensitivity. Very Young arches an eyebrow and nods. Yeah, I've gotten some of that. Mona sighs. You have? I'm sorry. Very Young shrugs. Men, pigs. What can you do? That is what I've been thinking about, my dear. Mona replaces her cup and stands up. I'd like to try and do something. I know I should have begun long ago, but your grandfather was such a pain in the ass. And he only got worse over the years, so it was going to be arguments and lawyers and lots of money down the drain and just fighting it with him about it. So I decided it would be better, probably better, if I just outlasted the bastard. Very Young is frowning with confusion. Mona, please, what are you talking about? A foundation, darling, and a think tank, a serious, scholarly think tank, and a media company to reach the masses. Mona is beginning to walk now, dreaming it. A movement, really. That's how I see it. Movement? Not just to beat up on men, of course, Mona says, although God knows I have no problem beating up on the men, but to inspire women like I've been. Give them tools for holding their own, weapons for fighting back when men are, as you said. Mona stops abruptly, the orange fabric of her caftan swishing around her legs. She peers into her smartphone screen. You can run it, dear. Set it up and run it. Come to Catalina. Very Young is fixed in place, her face a jumbled puzzle. I understand you've been working for a church, dear, Mona says more quietly, in Chicago. She tilts her head as if she is now the puzzled one. Chicago, darling, really? Is this what you want? Very Young pauses, then looks around sourly at her workplace. Well, she begins, but then doesn't go on. Mona sits herself back down to sum up her case. I named you, my dear. Your grandfather didn't want to do it, bribing your parents to name you Very Young. Mona is blushing now. The thing I had to do for him to get him to spend that money, I can't even tell you. Very Young scrunches her eyes closed. Geez, Mona, this is already too much information. Well, we were young, Mona sighs. Please, Mona! But yes, men are the way they are, Mona continues, and I leveraged that. He freed up the money, and your parents named you Very Young. I loved that song. I still love that song. She begins to sing softly, almost to herself, the notes quavering with the tremors of her old vocal cords. Oh, Very Young, what will you leave us this time? You're only dancing on this earth for a short while. Very Young is the one blushing now. She rolls her eyes. Mona, you don't have to sing to me. Mona holds a hand up in front of her phone screen. Wait, I'm getting to the good part. Very Young's feet shift with embarrassment. Mona, please, this song is really, really old. So am I, Mona replies, still smiling. I'm just coming to the best line. She sings into the screen again, her eyes shining. And if you want this world to see a better day. The melody doesn't resolve. The song hangs there. It's far from finished, but Mona stops singing. You are very young. I am very old. I could start this, but you could finish it. She looks a bit sternly into her phone screen. Come to Catalina, darling. At least come talk with me about it. Very Young looks at the ceiling uncomfortably. She looks back at her phone. Her face is blank. You can't tell what she's thinking. Mona raises her eyebrows. Please, darling, I'm in a bit of a rush. I have to do something about your grandfather's carcass. Very Young's shoulders slump. Okay, Mona, okay. I'll come out and talk about it. Mona slaps her lap and stands, elated. Lovely, darling. Find a flight. Send me the link. I'll buy you a ticket. Got to go. She pokes a finger at her screen and hurries toward her bedroom. In Chicago, in the church office, Very Young looks with bewilderment at her phone screen, even though the call has ended, which is how Very Young leaves the church and Ingrid takes her place. Chapter 56. I'll hand it back to you, Marjorie.
Here I come. No, I'm not muted. You can hear me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So I think we're going to run a little bit over, but I think it's totally worth it because I don't see a question in the chat, but I have a couple of questions and you might have questions of each other. I'll start with Hannah because she was the first reader. So I was really struck by the fact that the awards that you've won particularly pertain to your writing Jewish literature. The piece that you read didn't have that particularly. Can you say more about how that's important to you?
Yeah, it was interesting, like seeing the ways that I guess Jewish readers responded to the novel, because I wasn't, I think I became more aware of like my writing being Jewish, like I think while I was at my MFA program, I'm Jewish, and then I just kind of realized like, oh, you know, most of the characters that I'm writing are Jewish, but Judaism isn't like at the center of a lot of the stories and the fiction that I'm writing, but it's usually like part of their lives, even if it's not at the center of their lives. And in this particular book, the family grew up Jewish, and then there's a divorce sort of early in the family, and that's kind of like this after when the two sisters are young, and then they like after the father is Jewish, the mother is Catholic, and after the divorce, Judaism sort of the father's kind of off kind of makes his own family, and they no longer feel like Judaism is a part of their lives. And so there's like a real sense of that's like a real sense of loss for them. And one of the sisters sort of grows up and is like seeking out Judaism, and the other sister kind of like lets it go. And I guess it ends up kind of playing into these ideas of like what they find attractive in partners and what they're like desiring, because it was a real sense of loss for them. But it doesn't come up a whole lot in the book, but I think when it does come up, it has tended to maybe like resonate with people, and it feels important to me just because it's a part of my life. So
Thank you. Kind of about what it means to different people, to the different people in these novels as different things happen to them.
Yeah, I guess it's like pretty character driven in that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's we are. So there's a question for you, Hannah, but I'm going to hold it because I want to ask Doug a question first, and then we'll come back. So Doug, you and I talked about the stereotyping that you talked about you know, in your introduction. And so since you do that, and I know in other parts of the novel, you know, there are other people that you stereotyped with this goal of sort of, I use the word satire, but didn't. And when you read it aloud, you're really good, you're an actor and you can feel that. So the question is sort of, since you do some of this that could seem offensive, do you get blowback, or how do you sort of get away with reading it, you as a white guy?
Yeah, and I've done a number of author events, book signings, and so forth. And so I always read pieces of it. And actually, there are so many characters in this book that are expressed with different accents, which if a, you know, straight white male does the accent, it just looks offensive. And so two things. One is I try to be careful to express the whole message of the book in the setup of any event that I do. But the other thing I did was I went online and looked for people from these ethnicities who actually post websites about the, like, how the hilarious Korean guy, how to speak with a Korean accent, and how to speak with a Norwegian accent, and Spanish, Mexican accent, and so forth. And the book, the story of the book deals with even that directly, how a Mexican guy who can't overcome his Mexican accent sounds on the streets of Chicago, and the things you assume about him because of that. I mean, the book is just infused with that, but it's built, there's so much humor built into it that I think if you start reading it, you find that you get it, and the book gets away with it. It's really what. Since you and I started talking about the possibility of doing this event, the book has won a third award. It won the first prize in the humor division for Reader's Choice Awards. So in theory, it's the funniest book of the year. So apparently the humor thing works as a device to get people to look at their own stereotyping instincts and that whole realm of racism and sexism.
Well, good. I mean, that's really good to hear, and interesting that it's gone on to that kind of acclaim.
I'm really sensitive to the racist thing, excuse me, just because my firstborn is Black, and she's adopted. She's 32 now. And so our family has been tuned into this racial dynamic from day one.
Well, it's interesting that you did the research in terms of being able to speak those parts.